What happens when a bromance borrows every visual clue of a queer romance? The lingering looks, the possessive touches, the we are soulmates energy, but refuses to name it. And what if this show lands this close to being on Gaga Ulala, the dedicated queer streaming platform? In the last episode, we looked at fan service, that deliberate, calculated act of giving us fans the intimacy we crave. In the comments, the question arose whether or not the Thai entertainment industry deliberately uses this as queerbaiting. So today we want to have a look at this. What actually is queerbaiting? Where does it come from? Does it apply to the Thai entertainment industry? What does research say? So let's dive deep. Perspective, theories, and academic frameworks in this video are applied for analytical and entertainment purposes only. They are assembled through our own queer, feminist, and Western lens and are not intended to represent the only or definite way to understand Thai BL, GL, or fandom culture. The clips and examples featured in this video are included solely to illustrate the concepts discussed. They are not intended to mock, expose, or embarrass anyone. Listener curiosity, critical thinking, and a grain of salt are advised. History and definition. So let's start with where the term actually comes from, because this matters a lot whether it applies to Thai entertainment. The word queerbaiting and the mainstream usage can be traced back to the 2010s. That is when it started appearing in online fan spaces. In these spaces, queer fans were discussing shows like Supernatural, Sherlock, and Teen Wolf. Queer fans watching these shows noticed a pattern. The writers would hint on a gay or queer relationship, moments that felt loaded, glances that lasted a bit too long, lines that sounded like confessions. But the show never followed through. The relationship was never named. The characters officially stayed straight. And this is where this pattern was named queerbaiting. Queerbaiting is when a show or a company uses the suggestion of queerness to attract queer viewers and make money off their interests. This happens without ever actually committing to queer representation. Researchers describe this as safe queerness. Queer enough to make it interesting, but still straight enough to not lose the mainstream audience. So there's three things at the main point of this definition: suggestion without commitment, commercial motivation, fear of the mainstream by refusing to commit, not wanting to alienate straight or conservative viewers. The framework travels. Now the question arises, does this Western framework also apply to Thai entertainment, especially BL, GL, and the Khujin system? If you want to know more about the Khujin system and have not watched the recent deep dive, you can check it out. There's something that often gets lost when queerbaiting accusation flies to Thai BL and GL, because the content is not hiding its queerness at all. And this is also where it distances itself from so-called bromance stories like High School Frenemies or Y series show same-sex love stories openly. They show physical intimacy, emotional vulnerability, jealousy, heartbreak, family conflict around sexuality, basically all of it. Shows like Moonlight Chicken handle grief, aging, and queer love with a depth that few shows anywhere around the world match. GL series like Shades are dealing with family issues and family rejection around their children's sexuality. There are also openly queer people working behind the scenes, writers, directors, and there are also actors and actresses that have come out openly. This is not a picture of a completely straight industry that does not care about queer stories. However, it is not the queer paradise either. either. First, stereotypes, the ukuseme dynamics, the more feminine, passive character and the more masculine, dominant one, maps uncomfortably patriarchal gender roles. Second, where are the full-centered love stories about trans people? For bisexual or non-binary characters? For queer women that are not performing for a male or straight female gaze? The genre in general has expanded greatly and GL has expanded massively, but the representation that exists is still overwhelmingly cisgendered gay men in BL or cisgendered lesbian women in GL, often played by cisgendered actors or actresses within a very specific aesthetic framework. The spectrum of queer experiences mainly happens off-screen. So the queerness in Thai Y series is real, but it is also selective and it follows a commercial logic. The system. Researchers that argue that Thai BL and GL and the Khujin system qualifies as queerbaiting, or at least functions like it, typically make a few interconnected arguments. First, the structural argument. The Thai Y industry is built on a form of commodified queerness. So that means queerness is packaged and sold as a product. The way it works, two actors and actresses perform queer intimacy. Fans love it. That love translates into merchandise, streaming numbers, brand deals, and event tickets. The performance makes money. But here's the key point: the industry doesn't confirm or doesn't want to confirm whether these two people are in a same-sex relationship. The suggestion is the product. The confirmation is withheld. Research has a phrase for this, what I think is pretty useful. The system queers the persona without queering the person. Their performed queerness is visible, celebrated, and monetized. Their actual sexuality officially stays ambiguous. But this is when we talk about the Khujin system. If you follow K-pop, you might be familiar with this. It's similar to how K-pop companies sell a romantic or intimate image of a K-pop idol while keeping their real relationships or sexuality off the table. Real people. However, in Supernatural and Sherlock, the queerbaiting involves fictional characters, fake people written on a page, portrayed in a show. In the Thai BL and GL Khujin system, real people are the product. Real actors and actresses are performing queer intimacy, not just on screen, but at fan events, at fan meets, on their social media. Their real bodies, their real chemistry, their real relationship with each other, whatever that actually is. And in most cases, those real people are not publicly identifying as queer. So you have a system where queer performances is the commodity, and queer identity is the thing that is never confirmed, kept safely ambiguous behind the Khujin frame. And we have to keep in mind when we talk about queerbaiting, most of the conversation is still very rooted in the Western way of thinking about sexuality and gender. We tend to ask, is this person actually gay? Are they really queer? This makes sense in a culture where identity is very important and masculinity is defined a certain way, where you are expected to pick a label and stick to it. But that is not how every culture sees it. And this also raises the question, is there a meaningful difference between queerbaiting and an actor or an actress that have actually queer feelings, or who might be in a queer relationship, but exists in a social and professional environment where claiming this identity is complicated? And legal recognition is one thing. Social acceptance is another. It varies extremely on your class, where you're living, and on your family. Thailand gets a reputation internationally of a very queer-friendly country, and in some way it is, but this image can cover real inequalities, especially for people who aren't rich or in Bangkok. If you see an actor staying vague about who they are, is that a commercial calculation? Is it self-protection, or is it both at once? Researchers came up with the queer fantasy economy construct, which includes the Khujin system and real people. But real people cannot queerbait. A marketing team can, a fictional show can, but a human being? No, a real person cannot queerbait. Real people do not owe us to be explicit about their sexuality. We have multiple examples of this expectation causing harm, from actors being hunted out of fandoms because they don't want to label themselves, to the bizarre case of Mew, who is literally engaged to a man Toon. Still, in some corners of the internet, he is called queerbaiting. Real people don't owe us their coming out, their labels, their private lives. This is not critique anymore. This is entitlement. And when we forget that, we stop protecting queer audiences. We become the things that we said we were fighting against. And as our friend Laura always says, assume queerness with everybody. Queer audience. Here's something that a lot of discussions miss about this. What do queer viewers and the queer audience actually think about this? Because the original queerbaiting discussion came from queer fans that felt cheated. They had been promised something and it had been taken away. The emotional contract felt broken. Researchers who have done actual audience work with Thai BL and GL communities have found something that is a bit more complicated. A study found that audiences are not passive consumers that are being manipulated by the industry. Instead, fans co-construct what they called hyper-real experience. They knowingly blur the line between what is fiction and what is real as part as how they engage and find joy. They are not being tricked into believing the Khujin relationship is real. They are building and co-creating the fantasy themselves. Another study found something similar, which they then called creative misreading. Queer fans who understood exactly what they are watching but used it deliberately as a way of exploring queer identities, building community, and finding meaning. It is not deception, it is a conscious choice. Both studies point in the same direction, that the queerbaiting framework assumes that fans are being manipulated. But these fans are not victim of a trick. They are co-creators of this fantasy. They know the frame, or at least they should. That doesn't make all the ethical questions disappear. But that does mean that we should be careful of applying a framework that positions queer fans as a passive and deceived when the reality is more active and intentional than that. But I want to know your opinion on this as well, so please leave a comment. GL. Most of the research on Thai Y series and the question of queerbaiting focuses on BL, but the GL landscape deserves its own consideration because the research suggests that the interaction is generally a bit different. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, so this probably needs another video. If we want to do another deep dive, let me know in the comments as well. So queerbaiting isn't one thing. In the West, it's about baiting queer viewers and then pulling back for a straight audience. But in Thailand's Y series industry, the queer fantasy is the product. The queer audience is part of the room. But the Thai system isn't just. Stereotypes persist, and until recently, same-sex marriages were not legally recognized. So when an actor and actress stays ambiguous, ask yourself, is this a strategy or a self-protection? The real question is not whether to label it, it's whether the industry creates spaces for queer people, not just queer characters, to exist on their own terms. That's the conversation worth having. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to know all your opinions. Leave a comment. Thank you, Kufsi, for providing this space for filming. And if you have any wishes and suggestions for another topic, let us know as well. Queerbaiting is when a show or a company help me.
Thoughts and feelings, leave them down below.
Like, share and subscribe for even more fun in the future.